Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Today, I'm bringing you a solo episode that has been brought about by a number of things. But essentially, what I want to do today is offer some clarity, some gratefulness to your journey, and hopefully reach out to many of you that at times life gets on top of. And I've mentioned this in a podcast before where everyone has their own individual journey, right? Their own life experience. And the way I put it across was everyone's fucked in their own way. Now, that is not a flippant way of describing anyone. But what that does for me, when I heard this, a good friend that said it to me was, yeah, everyone's got their own version of what they've been through and the challenges that they've faced. And a lot of us that compete, a lot of us that are bodybuilders, we do that from a place of wanting to gain control, to gain purpose, and also to transform our lives. Now, I say lives, but essentially, when we get into this journey, a lot of that derives from wanting to transform your physique. But the mindset evolution that can come from this journey is phenomenal, depending on how much you want to dig down on your past, your current mental health, and how you're able to be vulnerable, be accepting of what you've been through in your life. And I'm never here to judge, to say, well, I've been through more than you, or I know people that have suffered more than you. Because let's play it straight. When you go through something in your life, at that time when it's very acute, that feels so tough in your head because it's you that's dealing with the challenge that has come up. And I feel like there's certainly phases of when you're going through something in life, you have that acute period where sometimes it feels like nothing is going to make that feel better. And the title of this podcast today, You're Not Going to War. What I want to bring relevance on is that bodybuilding and competing, it certainly is a privilege. And we can often get wrapped up in, for many different reasons, our own journey being that we're pouring everything into this. This is really hard, but we're maybe forgetting that actually we're in a very lucky position to be able to pursue physique development. And you're not going to war. That's certainly a phrase that gets thrown around in the bodybuilding space, social media, etc., etc. And there's this mentality of when you go to the gym, you're going to war, you're working hard. But do we potentially lose sight of that phrase? Yes, it may be done in, a way of banter or what have you, but those that actually reside over to that and become a person, a figure that really tries to labor home how hard the gym is there respect to people that are actually at war, that don't know when they're going to get their next meal, that are fighting for our country? Is there respect to people that are living minute by minute and they don't know if they're going to survive that day? And that's where, for me personally, and I know this is not just me, there's many people that share this thought process. There needs to be a level of gratefulness for what we actually get to put into this sport. And gratefulness is something that is so important for many of us that we can often forget when these challenges arise, or when we're putting this face on that we're doing something extreme, that we're doing something that other people don't do. And yes, we are doing something extreme and we are pushing to levels that many of the population will never do. But that is an opportunity for your own personal development. When we get wrapped up in that we deserve to place, or we deserve recognition every day, or whatever those thought processes are, we can often lose sight of remaining humble on our quest and doing it for ourselves. And you know, guys, from listening to the podcast, a lot of the guests that I have on that are extremely well known in the industry. And sometimes I don't expect it from certain guests. And I think, wow, you sort of share that mentality as well, that actually we're pursuing a pro card or a trophy or a place in, and we're pouring so much into it. But actually, when you look at it, you get your trophy, and then unless you're evolving yourself, what else are you getting from this journey? If all you're looking to achieve is a place in, a trophy, a pro card, where does that lead when you're injured, or when you retire from the sport, or when a family trauma arises, or something happens outside of bodybuilding? And this is where I feel it's so important that as bodybuilders, we also have gratefulness for life and what that can offer. Now, the different phases that we go through, I would say that we see this in all phases where it becomes this almost, you've earned this right to be a bodybuilder and a competitor, a coach in this space, and that gives you a sense of hierarchy. But what we must always try and remember is that this journey, this endeavor to continue progressing and improving ourselves, that is a gift, guys. It truly, truly is. And whatever got you into the physique development realm, whether it is that control, whether it is that purpose, not losing sight of that and getting too carried away is going to be really, really important. So when we look at the different phases, and if we talk about a prep, because although off season is very, very hard still for different reasons, I think a lot of the mindset shifts that can occur in a prep are a little bit more on this vibe of, you know, losing sight of what this journey is bringing you and where you started and what you wanted to achieve from the get-go. Because in a prep, we are doing things day in, day out to be able to achieve stage condition. So there's a lot that goes into this, a lot. And really, if you are pursuing this sport, particularly if you have ambitions to do well, then your whole life becomes bodybuilding and the prep. Now, I would certainly say that when you start your prep, although we have a lot to do and there's a lot of the box ticking that we all resonate with, there is that period of time, if you've come off the back of a growth phase or you've come off the back of a maintenance phase, that actually, generally speaking, you feel pretty good still. So you've had, you know, you've pushed your food up. You've had a good period of time, hopefully, where you've focused on health. You've had time to socialize, maybe do things that you wouldn't do in a prep. So that first portion of time can feel pretty good. Now, if this is your first time competing and doing a prep, this can be a shock to the system, but I'm speaking more so of if you've done this, you know, multiple times, maybe you're in your second time, maybe you're in your 8th time of doing a prep, you do know what's coming to a certain degree. So that first portion, if you've allowed enough time for your prep, can actually feel pretty good, particularly if you've pushed up pretty high in an off season. You're almost clucking to do the prep, because let's face it, if you have pushed that off season, you do get to a point where food is higher. Your physique is obviously very different to a stage physique. And you get that if you're in it for the right reasons and you're really focused on progressing your physique, you get to that point where it's like, I want to see what my physique looks like off the back of doing this growth phase. And that first portion can be a really nice phase to settle in, get back into the prep vibes. And then as we move through the prep, as the deficit gets deeper, this is often when we can have that skew of becoming so self-centered that we're forgetting that this is a privilege to be able to do a prep. we are essentially choosing to starve ourselves, to push into discomfort. And that is a choice, guys. Nobody's there telling you have to do this. And that choice can often get completely skewed when you're finding it hard. Now, a lot of the competitors that do well that I know that do well, and then they also enjoy all of the phases and they have a life outside of bodybuilding, are those that understand what needs to go into a prep and they accept it. Because if you go through a prep pushing back mentally that you don't want to do it, that it's hard, that you're hungry, that you're not sleeping, all of these things that occur, if you can constantly tell yourself all of these things, then what does that do? We know thoughts become things, right? But it's really, really easy to lose sight of that. And doing a prep, taking this challenge on, that is such a fucking sick opportunity. And what I would love to do is when I come across competitors that aren't able to get that mindset shift of being able to go, do you know what? I'm waking up every day and I'm gunning for this because I get to step on that stage condition ready. I get to wear an expensive bikini, or, you know, for the male categories, of course, we're not wearing a bikini, but you wear your jewelry, you get your hair done, you have your makeup done, you get a whole day celebrating your prep. And going back to that context, guys, some people can't even access having a hot shower. Some people are going day to day without knowing if they're going to eat again, whether they're going to find shelter. And I've been there myself, spending time on the streets and being homeless. Let me tell you, that gives you fucking context because it is so, so hard. And it's not something that I want to talk about again. Like I said right at the start, this is not for me to go, well, I've done this and this is harder than a prep. That's not me, what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, guys, that taught me a lot of lessons when you are literally walking the streets at night. And I was a teenager and I didn't know what was going to happen day in, day out. I didn't know if I would get through that day. I didn't know when I could eat. I've spoken about this more in depth on a previous podcast. I had to find food in dustbins to feed myself. And let me tell you, that strips every element of your who you are. That really does bring you to the absolute rock bottom. And even talking about it now, it feels like it was a previous life for me. It doesn't feel like it happened. And I feel like this period of my life, that's what has given me the most context to be where I am today in regards to my mindset and how grateful I am to be here today. And it also, this episode, it was sparked by, like I said, a number of things. But one thing that I saw when we were in Amsterdam just yesterday, many homeless people. There was one guy that was under the influence of something, and he was not here. Like, he was in a completely different reality, and he was having a really bad time, and he had cuts all over his body from what looked like self-harming. And then on the train back, we saw a young couple with a baby, and they had a pushchair that was just about holding together. And you could see, and I don't judge, I don't assume, but from what I could see, it looked like they were having a pretty hard time. And I sat there and I thought, I've been there where I've been an outcast, where I've been a nobody. And now I sit here with clothes on my back, knowing that I'm going home to a warm house, to have a nice dinner, and to be able to do this thing called bodybuilding. Wow, what a dose of context. And most of you guys will know I haven't spoken about it much on the podcast, but 4 weeks to the beach, when he came on, he mentioned it about my injury and what happened with the surgery I've just had. Again, another reason to give me personally a dose of reality to one day, albeit I was walking in pain, but I was walking. And then within a few days, I had to learn to walk again. I had emergency surgery and I can't train my legs. I can literally do knee raises and a few various other things, sit to stand. Yesterday, Amsterdam was the first time doing a full proper walk without my brace, and I can train upper body in the gym. Again, it's that realization that life can be taken away very, very quickly, or changed very, very quickly, should I say. And then when we relate this back to when we're pushing through in a prep and we're working hard to choose to be in a deficit, to restrict food, to increase exercise, etc., etc., what a fucking sick opportunity, guys. If I'd known when I was on the streets and I was, I didn't even have anywhere to sleep, I didn't have any access to food or money, I had no shoes. If I'd known that one day I could step on stage and I could even have a chance to win a bodybuilding competition, I don't think I would have believed you if you told me that was going to happen one day. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's so beautiful that we get this chance to exhibit our hard work on a stage. We can have sometimes our family and friends there. We get to do all of those exciting things for a show. And for me personally, I will never, ever moan about what goes into a prep. And this is where I want you to, if you're listening, if you're in a prep and it's hard, guys, but this is pushing yourself. This is taking opportunities to grow mentally. This is making a choice to exhibit a physique that you can be proud of. And if all you're equating that to is a trophy, then I would say it's something that you need to be very cautious of, because this is a subjective sport and the competitive side of our sport is only getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's going to be people out there that are taking more risks because their risk reward ratio is that the reward of getting that place in, of getting that trophy, that risk they're willing to take. And that's where there's a clear message for all of us here is whatever you're pouring into your physique development journey, whatever you're doing in your prep, particularly around PEDs, but for natural athletes as well, if you're continually pushing to extremes, this is not normal. And there is a time where this, like myself, this can cause you needing to have some time out away from the extremes of bodybuilding. Now, maybe you listen and you think, I don't fucking care, I'm all in. And that is a personal decision. I've been there, guys, for sure. I get it. You're in that mindset of, I don't give a fuck about my relationships. I don't give a fuck about what people think. If I lift a trophy, then a big fuck you to everyone watching. But that is driving from ego, and it can become a very lonely spot. I've mentioned this before. Mentally, bodybuilders can pour so much into this sport that they can either get to a point where they cannot continue because of an injury or, like I say, a family crisis, something like this. And what happens when you're there? When you've poured so much into this sport, when it's removed, what do you do? Mentally, you collapse. And this has ended in bodybuilders taking their life. And this is not a joke. This is serious, guys. Because if you become so mentally invested in this and your blinkers are so focused on that, and you're not taking care of yourself mentally outside of bodybuilding and being able to go through these different phases, it can end in a very, very tough spot. And what comes from that, right? If you've pushed everyone away, if you've focused in so much that you don't care about anyone else, what you can do is find yourself alone, but you can also find yourself alone in a very disturbed place mentally, which is hard to get out of, guys. And bodybuilding, like I'm saying, you know, the passion, the love for this is so fucking cool. But when reality hits, actually, what we're getting to do is things that a lot of people will never get to experience. And maybe you've worked through a lot of trauma to get to this privileged position. No one will ever take that away from you. And pursuing this, being able to continue on this journey, what I would say is, if you've been through trauma, if you've been through periods of life, which I know personally, some of you that listen have, that trauma that you've been through, that can be what gets you through the hard times as a competitor, 100%. But there is that way up of, if you've been through trauma and people have inflicted pain on you and have told you you're not good enough, and there's lots of different examples there of what people can inflict on you, if you utilize that and that's all you focus on is proving someone else wrong, or, you know, essentially not doing it for yourself, what happens if you turn up at your show and you don't get the placing you're trying to get through trying to get back at someone else? Or, you know, this could be trauma from childhood, right? And you're setting out as a bodybuilder to prove people wrong, to be able to get to a pinnacle of the bodybuilding. But then it's very, very hard to flex between these phases, because more often than not, we validate ourselves through what placing we get when we compete. So if we lift a trophy, if we place. So if we're searching for that validation, what happens if we don't get it, guys? And what happens if those people you're trying to prove wrong, what happens if that haunts you, if you're not then able to do a growth phase, you're not able to step away from stage? You then get into the realms of compromising your health, your organs, your mental health, your relationship with yourself, food, exercise, all of those things that are on the peripheral as bodybuilders. But if you're listening to this and you're in this position, you know me, I don't want to just say X, Y, Z and not give potential solutions and outcomes. Now, what I would say is, in the past, when I have had elements of wanting to prove people wrong, or to be able to do this so I can say, fuck you guys, I've won a show, or whatever the example is, it's not as sweet as you think it is. Because actually, a lot of the time, the people that have put us down, the people that have potentially led us to get into rock bottom, the people that have given us so much shit that we don't even know if we can get past the trauma that we faced, they're gone. And really, you lifting a trophy, if you can get fulfillment for doing this for yourself, that is so much more rewarding than if you're trying to do it against someone that has inflicted pain on you years ago or recently or whenever that was, because you're leading with elements of not wanting to do this for yourself. And what I've also noticed is, if you're not doing this for yourself, and what I would say is the right reasons, as it were, then what can happen when we're committing to extremes? We can fall off. Because in the prep example, when you're hungry, when you're tired, what stops you cheating on your diet? Because really, those people or anyone that's doubted you in the past, they're not there. It's just you there. And it's you that's got to find a way to get through this. And when we experience things in a prep where we slip away from the plan, So as the example of cheating on our diet, that's you that's got to live with that. And that's you that's got to step on stage knowing that you slipped up. Again, that's not a nice position to be in. Whereas what I would tell you is, and what I want to share, is if you're prepping because you're grateful for this opportunity, you want to excel at something, you want to do well, you want to step on stage and be able to exhibit your physique, do yourself proud, do other people proud. This, guys, this is living as a competitor that wants to grow as a person also. And it makes me smile so much and feel so much happiness when I see this attitude in competitors. It is honestly the most wonderful feeling, because that took me years to get to that spot where I was able to truly step on stage and go, wow, I'm so proud of what I've done. And I don't have any elements of wanting to, get back at anyone or prove anyone wrong. But also for me, the biggest part here was not necessarily proving people wrong, proving myself wrong, that I was able to do this and be a bodybuilder. Because let me tell you, the imposter syndrome that I had, whoa, absolutely wild. Again, something that probably resides in, of course, my past, but also me being able to remain humble, because it is such a wicked thing that we get to do. So fucking cool. And that imposter syndrome, the big change there for sure was when I became successful in the sport. Now, if you're listening, and I've been speaking with a new listener today who I spoke about doing this episode with, and she shared with me, her name is Jen, about how tough it is to sort of combat that imposter syndrome, to be knowing that you're nailing all your boxes, ticking all your boxes, but when you get to stage, it's like, holy shit. Whoa, I've got a pose, I'm half naked, all of these things that occur, and it's like, whoa, this is pretty overwhelming. And what I want to do, Jen, is share it on this episode today, because I believe this is something that may help other people, particularly if you're new to the sport, is that practicing your posing, of course, is a big, big thing here. But something that I always felt myself was, what is the worst that can happen? So this is certainly something that we can tie back into what our subject is today. You're not out fighting battles where, you're literally risking your life. What you're doing is going on stage and experiencing your show. And the best way I used to frame this as a female is, what is the worst that can happen, right? The worst thing that can happen in my mind was I fucking fall head over heels, literally. And what happens then, though, guys? So this is the worst thing that maybe could happen when we're on stage. You get attention. You get the judge's attention. So I always thought, if I fall over and make an absolute tit of myself, I gain that acknowledgement from the judges. They look at me, I have attention, I get back up and I fucking rock it. Now, to be able to rock the stage, where does that come from? Because I'm certainly not someone that this comes naturally to. But what I would say is, if you are doing this for the right reasons, you've nailed every part of your plan and you're proud of what you've done, you go on that stage and you remember, guys, what you have poured into this, what you've done to get to stage. Those judges are there. And yes, okay, sometimes it goes around about the politics and everything else in bodybuilding. However, if you want to gain attention, if you want to bring your likelihood of placing up, nailing your posing practice throughout your prep and presenting with stage presence, Let me tell you, when I sit at a judge's table, there's a night and day difference to someone that is performing, because this is a stage performance, right? So when you're behind that curtain, when you're ready to go, if there is a curtain, that is, that moment there, just before you go on, you take a deep breath. And this is what I do when I meet people backstage and I get the chance, people that are really like, shit, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm fucking scared. I'm anxious. And this is what I say to them. Remember what you've poured into this. If you've done your posing practice, if you've stuck to your plan, you go out there and you fucking show the judges and that audience what you've done to get there. Because the confidence that comes across from a competitor will be a night and day difference to someone that walks out and hides their physique, that's shy, that's not sure. And another big tip here, guys, if you haven't done this already, is to go to group posing sessions. So whether that's with the federation, whether that's a stage workshop like what Emma does, Emma the Posing Pro, any of those things to get stage time is certainly a big tip there. Because I know people that have not had the best physique on stage, but they've got a higher placing because their posing and their stage presence is bang on. So this is a big difference here, because it's so important. And this is where also that mentality of, I've worked so hard, I've been to war, showing the judges that is not going to help your stage presence. What we want to do is exhibit our physique and feel good about that, feel positive about that, and show the judges and the audience that you are there to win. And that's what the winner's mentality is. The winner's champion mindset is not someone that walks on stage pissed off because it's been so hard. Their heads down, they do the poses, and all they want to do is get a place in and fuck off and get out of the prep. That's not a champion mindset, guys. And it's so important. And then upholding that sportsmanship. Yes, there will be athletes that aren't happy and they show that. Fine. If that's your vibe, that's your vibe. However, is that the right way to treat our sport? Is that the right way to treat other people that have worked just as hard as you? Maybe harder, maybe not as hard, but people that have also come to the show to exhibit their physique as well, that have also been through a prep. And it's a night and day difference, guys. That attitude of thinking that you have to win, that you should win. Remember, someone's got to win, and this is a subjective sport. Taking the judges' feedback, if you can get that, speaking with your coach, which is super important. If you've done everything on the plan, then what do? You look at your stage performance, you look at your physique, you compare to the winners, and you put a plan together. And that's what's important. That's all we can do within our power, because you cannot change the judges' minds. And Tim said this on a podcast that I did with him. Absolutely love this sentiment. You can't change the judge's mind on that day, but what you can do is go and do an off season. You can work on progression, and you can change the judge's minds the next time you step on stage. What a great way to look at this progression that we're looking for in a physique-based sport. I absolutely love that. And I remember that a lot, right? Because you pissing and moaning, you storming off stage, you know, getting aggy about it, you telling people that you deserve to win. What's that for if you didn't win, guys? What's it for? All it's going to do is exhibit negative self-talk and negative environments. What I would say is you get your head down, you listen to what the feedback is, and you crack the fuck on. Because if you stay in this mindset of feeling that you deserve a better placing, but there's no way you're going to get that placing, right? The show is done. This feeds into negativity against the privilege of being a competitor. And that is super important, guys. Now, we've spoken about prep. shows and how that mindset can completely overtake us. And this can also happen when we're in a growth phase, because many of you listening, as I do or have done in my past, will struggle with the elements of off season, right? Because coming away from being stage lean, that's often where we can find the struggles, but also the validation that we get, everything that happens around an off season, that can change compared to what we get in regards to validation when we are getting lean, when we're leading up to a competition. But what you need to remember is when you're in an off season, you're still prepping for a competition. If you're serious about this sport, if you want to progress, if you want to do well, there's no off switch, guys. Yes, in off season, we can incorporate meals out, less time in the gym, etc., etc. However, if you are focused on progressing your physique, your off season is geared towards the next time you step on stage. And that is why a lot of people won't progress, because they don't give enough time. But also, that is why people fall out of love with the sport, or they don't really understand the longevity of the sport. Now, if your goal is to step on stage as an achievement, then fine. But that clarity and that expectation needs to be clear from the start. If you then do it and you really enjoy it, and you need to look at a longer growth phase, then guess what? This could be 18 months, 2 years, 3 years for some people, depending on how far you want to take this. So this is where that mentality of gratefulness for what we're doing will completely ring true. Because if you're committing to a long growth phase, what's going to keep you motivated? It's got to be an internal job. And motivation is probably the wrong word, because motivation ebbs and flows, right? Depending on what's going on. But what I've certainly found myself through my whole time of bodybuilding is when I have faced challenging times, when I've faced trauma, when things have not gone right, I fucking love bodybuilding. So the fundamentals, they're always there for me. They're my safety blanket. They're what gives me purpose and structure. I absolutely love every part of this. And what I've learned to love in an off season is pushing into discomfort in a completely different way. I always sort of bring this in my own mind together, and people have said this to me, that I can prep. That's cool, right? There's no fucking chance in hell I'm going to cheat on my diet or do any of those things that come away from the plan. However, when we transfer that into off season, that's what's hard for me personally. Now, there's going to be people that find off season easier, or well, not easier, but you know what I mean. There's going to be people that lend themselves better to a prep. Maybe you're a bit of both. And this is what's important about spending longer periods of time in an off season and potentially getting to points where your food is uncomfortable, your body composition is uncomfortable. One being, what are you looking to achieve? Do you want to step on stage looking the same? And two being, do you love the journey? Do you love what goes into this? And can you reframe it? So for me, training progression in an off season, yes, I'm in a bigger body, but I can train so much harder. I can eat more food that brings health, that can help me bring, of course, my health markers into a better spot. I can sleep. I can do day-to-day things and not be hanging out my arse. So this is pretty cool. So then when I next go into a prep, I'll be fucking ready. But that's what I want that message here to be, is that when we have that transition into a prep, enjoy your off season, right? And when you get to that point, and this is something I do with clients, you get to that point where it's like, oh, this is pretty uncomfortable. You then hang it out for a little bit longer, so maybe 4 to 6 weeks, and you capitalize on the height of your off season. Your food is at its highest, your training is at its best, your sleep is good, all of these things are in line, right? Okay, let's really push that a little bit more. And let's get that mindset ready to want to really get into this prep, to think, fuck, I really want to get lean now. And that's a very nice way to frame it. And in off season, we get the same sort of, but on the other end of the spectrum, oh, I'm so full of food. I'm fed up of it. Oh, I don't want to do this anymore. But what's your goal, guys? Because if you're moaning about it again, this is where the negative self-talk turns into negativity towards what you've chosen to do, the physique development path. And that is not what we want. So when we look at going through these multiple phases as a bodybuilder, all of this comes back down to what is it you're looking to achieve. And for me, certainly these moments recently that have accumulated and urged me to want to do one of my solo podcasts is that life is so precious. And what is hard to see is when we lose sight of what's important in our lives outside of bodybuilding. Again, I've put bodybuilding first for many, many years. What's been difficult for me is to find other priorities that are higher than bodybuilding. And that's tough because when we talk about relationships, and this is where my thought process is relationships, putting them on the back burner and focusing so much on myself and feeling that, why wouldn't I focus on myself? This is a great thing I'm doing. Everyone should respect that. Everyone should support me. Guess what, guys? People are going through some fucking shit times as well. And you are not the center of the universe. You might be in your head, but you're not always going to be the one that everyone thinks, oh, well, you're having it really tough because you're in a prep, because perhaps they see that you're choosing to do this. And all of this today, all of what I've spoken about in this episode, it's that reality check to go, do you know what? What I'm doing is so fucking epic that actually maybe I need to take a moment and go, do you know what? I'm grateful for this. I'm truly, truly grateful for this continual opportunity to invest in myself. I hope that, this comes across in the right way. I'm not here to ever say, you should feel this or you should feel this or you shouldn't do this. But what I do feel is that we need to sometimes have a respect to when we're in these grateful opportunities and, we're moaning and we're projecting our shit on other people and on ourselves. But actually, there's nothing wrong in life. We're in a very good spot. But what is hard is the endeavor of the physique development journey. Perhaps we need to just have that reality check and be able to express our gratefulness for what we're able to do. So I'm going to leave it there today, guys. And of course, if you found this a useful episode, if you can resonate, then of course, my inbox is always open. And I always appreciate anyone sharing this on their stories because it helps me get the message out there. So thank you, guys. And of course, I will speak to you next week.